Olivia Kane wasn't just jealous, she was dangerous. And when Daniel Mercer, a young lawyer, found himself trapped beside her in a high-speed chase, their toxic love story turned into one of the most shocking police pursuits the city had ever seen. Olivia Kane was the kind of woman who walked into a room and immediately took control, not through charm or kindness, but through intensity. People noticed her fiery personality and unpredictable moods, but Daniel Mercer had convinced himself he could handle it. As a young lawyer just starting his career, Daniel wanted stability, but Olivia was anything but stable. At first, her behavior seemed exciting: late-night drives, spontaneous trips, and dramatic displays of affection that made him feel wanted. Yet beneath the excitement, there was a darker side that became harder to ignore. Olivia was possessive in ways that went far beyond the normal boundaries of a relationship. She wanted to know where Daniel was at every moment, who he was speaking to, and why he wasn't answering his phone within seconds. Her world revolved around control, and she expected his world to revolve entirely around her. For a while, Daniel brushed off her obsessive tendencies as passion, thinking she would calm down once she felt secure. Instead, her behavior escalated. She began appearing outside his office, waiting in her car for hours just to see who came and went. Clients noticed her glaring from the parking lot, and Daniel's colleagues whispered about the girlfriend who seemed more like a stalker than a partner. He tried to set boundaries, but Olivia didn't take no for an answer. The more distance he asked for, the tighter she clung. At home, their arguments grew louder, with Olivia smashing plates or threatening to walk out, only to return minutes later with tears and apologies. The breaking point came when Olivia discovered messages from a female colleague on Daniel's phone. They were simple exchanges about a court case, nothing inappropriate, but in Olivia's mind, they were proof of betrayal. The rage she felt was overwhelming, and Daniel could see in her eyes that something inside her had snapped. That night wasn't like their usual arguments. Olivia wasn't just angry, she was determined to prove something, to show Daniel he could never escape her grip. She wanted a reaction, and when she grabbed his car keys with a wild look on her face, Daniel felt the cold dread of realizing he no longer had any control. What had once been an unpredictable relationship had now crossed into dangerous territory. And as Olivia stormed out toward the car, he knew this night would not end quietly. Olivia stormed out of the apartment with Daniel's car keys clutched tightly in her hand, her steps quick and unsteady. Daniel followed in panic, trying to reason with her, but she was already behind the wheel before he could stop her. He had two choices: let her drive off in rage, or get inside to try and keep things from spiraling even further. Against his better judgment, he slid into the passenger seat, hoping he could calm her once they were on the road. The moment the engine roared to life, he knew he had made a mistake. Olivia's eyes were fixed on the windshield, her jaw tense, and her grip on the steering wheel so tight her knuckles were white. Without hesitation, she pressed hard on the accelerator, sending the car lurching forward into the night. The streets of the city blurred as Olivia sped through them with reckless abandon. Traffic lights became meaningless obstacles, and honking horns filled the air as drivers swerved to avoid her erratic movements. Daniel's heart pounded as the car shot through an intersection seconds before cross-traffic barreled through. It wasn't just anger driving her now, it was adrenaline, an intoxication with speed and the chaos it created. Pedestrians on sidewalks turned their heads as the black sedan flew past, a blur of motion and danger. Olivia's anger had transformed into something larger, a wild energy that no words could tame. It wasn't long before the police received reports of a reckless driver tearing through downtown. Calls flooded in from frightened witnesses who had narrowly avoided collisions. Within minutes, the wail of sirens pierced the air, growing louder as patrol cars closed in. Daniel felt trapped, sitting beside the woman who was rapidly losing all sense of reason. Every siren in the distance seemed to push Olivia further, as though the chase itself had become her goal. Instead of slowing down, she pressed harder on the gas, weaving through cars with a dangerous precision that was as terrifying as it was skillful. Daniel tried to keep himself steady as the city lights streaked by in dizzying flashes. He could see officers closing in behind them, their headlights cutting through the night. What had begun as an argument in their apartment had turned into a nightmare that neither of them could escape. Olivia was no longer just angry at him, she was feeding on the chaos she had created, dragging him deeper into her madness with every reckless turn of the wheel. The sirens grew louder as the police closed in, but Olivia seemed almost energized by their presence. Her eyes flickered to the rearview mirror, a twisted satisfaction spreading across her face as the flashing lights followed her. Daniel sat frozen, every nerve in his body tense, realizing he was not simply a passenger, but a hostage in her game. The streets became a blur of motion as she darted through narrow lanes, clipping curbs and skidding dangerously close to parked cars. Each sharp turn made the tires screech, leaving marks on the asphalt like scars of her descent into madness. The officers behind her tightened their pursuit, knowing the driver they were chasing had no intention of surrendering peacefully. What frightened Daniel most was not just the speed, but the look in Olivia's eyes. She wasn't driving to get away, she was driving to prove a point only she understood. Every red light she blew through and every pedestrian she nearly missed seemed to fuel her further, as if chaos itself was giving her strength. For the police, this was a reckless suspect fleeing justice. For Daniel, it was a terrifying window into just how far she was willing to go to keep control over him. The woman he had once trusted now seemed unrecognizable, consumed by an obsession that cared little for life or consequence. The chase wound deeper into the city, and more patrol cars joined in, boxing her in with flashing blue and red. Olivia refused to yield. Instead, she swerved suddenly onto a one-way street, going against traffic, forcing oncoming drivers to scatter in panic. Horns blared, brakes screeched, and Daniel could see pure chaos erupting in their wake. The officers followed cautiously, unwilling to let her slip away, but aware of the destruction unfolding with every second. It was no longer just about stopping a reckless driver, it was about preventing disaster. Daniel's mind raced, torn between the fear of crashing and the dread of what would happen if Olivia was finally forced to stop. She had lost touch with reality, and he was trapped at her side, powerless to intervene. The longer the chase dragged on, the clearer it became that this wouldn't end without a violent turn. Olivia wasn't simply running from the law. She was dragging everyone, including Daniel, into her storm of chaos, a storm that seemed destined to leave wreckage behind. Olivia pushed the car harder as the chase left the heart of the city and bled into the darker outskirts, where streetlights were fewer and the roads stretched wide and empty. The sirens still trailed close behind, echoing through the night like a relentless reminder that there was no way out. Daniel sat stiffly, gripping the door handle so tightly that his hand began to ache. He knew the police weren't just chasing a reckless driver. Anymore, they were pursuing someone who had become a danger to everyone in her path. Olivia, however, seemed convinced she could outsmart them. Every sharp turn and sudden swerve was a calculated act of defiance, as if she was daring them to keep up. The longer the chase continued, the more coordinated the officers became. Units ahead positioned themselves on side roads, preparing traps to force the car to a halt. One squad set up spike strips at a major intersection, their headlights forming a barricade in the distance. Daniel spotted the flashing lights before Olivia did, and his stomach dropped. He braced himself, certain the car would be shredded to pieces in seconds. But at the last moment, Olivia's instincts took over. She slammed the wheel to the side and cut off the road, hurtling onto an unfinished construction site where half-built structures stood like skeletons in the shadows. Dust and gravel exploded under the tires as the sedan plowed through a flimsy chain-link fence. The car bounced violently over uneven ground, jarring Daniel against his seat. Olivia didn't slow down. She treated the maze of steel beams, scaffolding, and dirt mounds like her personal playground, weaving the vehicle through obstacles with a recklessness that made every second feel borrowed. Patrol cars followed cautiously, their lights throwing eerie glows across the empty site, but the uneven terrain slowed them down. For a brief moment, it felt as though Olivia had gained the upper hand. Yet with every turn, the danger grew worse. The narrow paths and blind corners left no room for error, and Daniel could feel the car fighting against her control. Loose gravel made the tires slip, and the sound of metal scraping echoed whenever the sedan clipped a pile of construction debris. Olivia didn't care. To her, this was a stage where she could prove that no one, not even the law, could cage her. Daniel, trapped in the passenger seat, knew the game couldn't last forever. The sight was a dead end, and sooner or later, Olivia's reckless confidence would collide with reality. The car tore deeper into the construction site, its headlights bouncing wildly off steel beams and half-built concrete walls. Olivia gripped the wheel with frantic determination, her breathing heavy, her knuckles pale against the leather. Dust clouded the air, reducing visibility, but she didn't slow down. Daniel felt every jolt as the tires slammed over uneven ground, each impact threatening to throw the vehicle off balance. He pressed himself against the seat, knowing the end was near but powerless to stop it. Patrol cars surrounded the perimeter, their sirens replaced by commands over loudspeakers warning Olivia to surrender. To her, the words were meaningless noise. She was beyond reason, fueled by the idea that she could keep control until the very last second. The sight turned into a labyrinth of danger. Olivia swerved to avoid a mound of gravel, barely missing a steel pillar that scraped the side of the car. Sparks flew as metal ground against metal, leaving the sedan scarred. Daniel's pulse hammered in his ears, every nerve in his body screaming for the madness to end. And then it happened. Olivia attempted another sharp turn around a stack of concrete blocks, but the tires slid on the loose gravel. The car spun out of control, the headlights sweeping wildly before it slammed head-on into a concrete barrier with a sickening crunch. The impact sent a shudder through the vehicle, airbags exploding, smoke and dust filling the air. The world seemed to pause in the seconds after the crash. Daniel forced himself to move, his body aching as he pushed open the crumpled passenger door. He stumbled out, coughing, his suit torn and face streaked with dust. Behind him, Olivia remained in the driver's seat, her hands still locked on the wheel as if she refused to let go. Police officers rushed forward, weapons drawn, surrounding the wreck from all sides. Shouts filled the air, commands barked sharply as they pulled Daniel to safety and turned their attention to Olivia. She resisted even then, thrashing and shouting as they dragged her from the smoking vehicle. The aftermath was swift and merciless. News of the chase spread across the city before dawn, the story of a respected young lawyer trapped in a nightmare with a girlfriend whose jealousy had spiraled into chaos. Olivia faced a long list of charges: reckless driving, endangerment, resisting arrest, her mugshot capturing the defiance still burning in her eyes. Daniel, though alive, was left with more than physical bruises. The chase had scarred his reputation and his trust, a reminder of how quickly love could twist into destruction. What had begun as an argument behind closed doors had ended in flashing lights, shattered steel, and a story the city would never forget.